All right, if everybody would take their seats, we're going to get started here. I am your fill-in host. My name is Jay Dyer. I want to thank everybody for being patient and coming back. We had a couple technical issues yesterday with the live stream, so I want to thank those who were patient with us listening on the live stream, and those will be available in the next few days. There will be emails that will be sent out that will explain all that information and how to get the DVDs and so forth. So, like I said, my name is Jay Dyer. I'm the proprietor of jaysanalysis.com. It deals with film, philosophy, geopolitics, and the esoteric. I'm also the host of Esoteric Hollywood, a late-night talk show on talknetwork.com through Natural News with Mike Adams. So if you want to watch that, you can watch that every Tuesday to Friday night, 10 to midnight Pacific. So next up, we have Dr. J.E. Brandburg, and he's going to be speaking to us about evidence for a Martian nuclear massacre, the Sidonian hypothesis, and Fermi's paradox. Actually, I think the full title is Death on Mars, Evidence of an Extraterrestrial Nuclear Massacre. Dr. Brandburg.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a great honor to be here speaking to you all. And before I do anything, I'd like to commend all of the citizens of the great state of Texas for keeping a calm head and your eyes peeled and your powder dry during this recent Jade Helm fiasco. As somebody who's worked closely with the government for my career, that looked like a dress rehearsal for a martial law imposition or maybe even a Trojan horse. And you guys showed them that was going to be a very, 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 very big bite that was going to be impossible to do that. And so anyway, well done, well done. We were all watching you, by the way, and ready to come down. I went out and bought an AR-15 myself, in fact. So anyway, well, the problem is when you find out that your government may be keeping mortal threats to your safety secret from you, you start to regard everything they do with even more suspicion than you ought to as citizens of a free country. Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." And I will talk about that during this talk, but let's talk about the planet Mars. And I'll be talking about a very important scientific puzzle called Fermi's paradox, which has to do with the universe as a whole and Mars, the planet Mars. We'll be talking about evidence of large thermonuclear explosions in Mars past, the correlation of those sites of those explosions with Cydonia and Galaxis, archaeological sites on Mars, and where this leaves us in a new cosmos. I will be talking about a mental survival kit, God, Guts, and Guns in the New Cosmos. We'll discuss why would the government decide to do something so out of character as to start revealing this now, and then I'll summarize. Fermi's paradox originates from a conversation between Enrico Fermi and Edward Teller. Edward Teller was the father of the hydrogen bomb, beat the Russians by only a few months in inventing that, by the way. And Enrico Fermi was the first person to set off a controlled nuclear chain reaction, both geniuses. And these guys had just gone through World War II. They were racing to develop the hydrogen bomb before Joseph Stalin could get it. And Fermi was known for somebody who was a very quick study. He could analyze a problem given a few parameters, connect the dots quicker than anybody. And he was sitting there. They were talking about extraterrestrial life at Los Alamos in the cafeteria. And suddenly he exclaimed, to the scientists, Edward Teller being the closest one to him, where the hell are they? And what he meant was, we live in a universe that is full of the stuff of life. And even in those days, they had evidence for planets around other star systems, and it didn't take much imagination to imagine that the solar system was not unique. Especially now, we know that just about every star has planets. The pattern of the cosmos is hen and chicks. You have a star, that's the hen, and then the chicks are the planets. So he had figured this out and realized that the human race, he had just gone through World War II. He had to rescue his wife from the Holocaust because she was Jewish. Edward Teller was Jewish. He had escaped Europe. They knew the human race probably better than anybody on Earth. And he said, the human race is very random, badly behaved, and noisy. If we are typical of intelligent life in the cosmos should be packed with people like us. We should be pointing our radio telescopes everywhere in the sky and picking up soap commercials, propaganda, and fundraising campaigns. And instead, we hear nothing. It's as silent as a cemetery. Where the hell are they? So he realized, based on our experience on Earth with the human race and the very fertile nature of the Earth and the cosmos in which it resides, the universe should be alive and noisy with intelligent life, and instead it is silent and forbidding, at least as far as publicly known. Now, there's something else that I've understood as I've gotten older. The universe, the human race, knows it's not alone in the universe. It's known that since its earliest times. Humanity is basically psychic. Jung formalized this with the idea of the collective subconscious, that no secret can remain a secret among the human race because people will just guess it spontaneously if the secret tries to stay secret long enough. So in this sense, science fiction is probably a more accurate portrayal, gives a more accurate portrayal of the cosmos and the human interaction with it than science. Science is very cautious and kind of milquetoasty. But I want you to also remember another saying by Carl Jung is, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. In other words, if you want to know the truth about something, you must be willing to face it. Otherwise, your attempt to find the truth is a doomed exercise. Now, this is the planet Mars. It is the closest planet in the cosmos that is like Earth. This is what it looks like now, of course. It is basically a frozen desert, but in the past, it used to have an ocean in the north and be very Earth-like. I was the first person to propose the Paleo-ocean on Mars. They don't give me credit because you've got to understand something about science. Science is like professional basketball. It's not supposed to be a contact sport. But in the big leagues, the elbows and knees fly, especially when it's under the net in the playoffs. So I have the scars to prove it. So anyway, Wikipedia gives me credit for the first proposal of the Paleo-ocean on Mars, even if Jet Propulsion Lab, also known as Just Plain Liars, do not. So, yeah. So anyway, the Viking lander was a magnificent accomplishment. I mean, here I am talking trash about Jet Propulsion Lab. They are magnificent technicians, and they are following orders, of course, either spoken or unspoken. And they landed on Mars in 1976 in a magnificent demonstration of American technology. All of the time you thought we were going to Mars and the moon for science or some great human adventure. No, we were doing this to show up the Russians and make them think twice about having a war with us, and it worked. We gave them an enormous scientific and technological inferiority complex. And since most of the Cold War was psychological, this was extremely important. Now, when the Viking lander landed, we landed 2 landers on Mars for the US bicentennial. And the first thing they did was sample the atmosphere. Now, the atmosphere of a planet, especially like Earth, tells you a lot about the planet. Our atmosphere is 20% oxygen. The rest is nitrogen, and then there's various noble gases that don't interact with anything. And planetary scientists pay careful attention to what are called the noble gases that don't chemically interact with things. Things like these are like neon, helium, argon, and a gas called krypton. Also the planet where Superman came from. It's actually a gas on the periodic table. And then there is xenon. Xenon is the heaviest of the noble gases, and it has a very interesting property. It has 5 stable isotopes. So you can run a fingerprint. Depending on the relative abundances of these isotopes, you can run a fingerprint and figure out what has happened on that planet, especially as far as nuclear things, because of the xenon. And as I found out when I was investigating this finally, I started out investigating the dark secrets of Mars, and I ended up finding the dark secrets of Earth. Yes, I learned things about the human race that I'd rather not have learned. But Mars has very unique xenon isotopes. They are different than Earth. They are different from Jupiter, from the solar wind coming straight from the sun. They're different from any moon rocks. If you grind up meteorites and get the gas out of there, the xenon in there, all follows the same pattern that's very similar to Earth, and this is considered the standard solar system mix of xenon that we inherited from the interstellar dust that formed the solar system. But Mars is so distinctive that you probably wondered, how do they know if a meteorite is from Mars? Well, one way they do it is they sample the xenon in it. If the xenon matches Mars, they know it's from Mars because there is no xenon like it from any other body in the solar system. Whoops. Everything was going so smoothly up until now. Here. Here is Mars xenon versus Earth xenon. Earth is in blue. You can see they overlay very well for the isotopes 132, 134, etc. But at 129, Mars has 2.5 times more xenon 129 than the Earth does. And by the way, it has this, you could put any other planet up there and it would look the same. Mars is different from every other planet. It has this big load of xenon 129. And sadly, this is weapons signature. If you match this xenon to the output of a hydrogen bomb, you get a very good match. There is only one place in the solar system where in a planetary atmosphere you find anything like the xenon signature of Mars, and that is the part of the atmosphere of the Earth that has changed dramatically since 1945 when we discovered nuclear weapons. This data, which was published shortly after the landing on Mars, shows that for xenon 129, here's Earth before 1945, or here it is now, and here it is from air samples before 1945, and you can see 10%, roughly 10% of the xenon 129 wasn't there before. Most of the other xenon isotopes haven't changed at all, but 129 has changed considerably, and that's because of the open air nuclear tests and also production of plutonium. In fact, if I was really interested, I could probably try and parse out how much plutonium this intelligent species on this planet has made. It is more than you imagine in your worst nightmares. Imagine finding out that your cousins have been stockpiling gun ammunition at their farm. You go out to visit them and you find that the barn is full. Under all the cushions on the couch, there's ammunition. And in all of the desk drawers, there's ammunition. And in the sock drawers too, under the socks, there's more and more ammunition. The human race has been arming itself to the teeth for a big nuclear war since 1945. And the way we know that is because of this xenon 129, because of the testing of nuclear weapons and the production of plutonium. This requires fast neutrons. Fast neutrons don't react as well as the slow neutrons. Now, if we take the weapons xenon and mix it with like 30-70, 30% or normal Earth and then 70% weapons xenon, we get Mars. And this indicates that on Mars, nuclear reactions occurred which dwarf anything that happened on Earth. Most of the Martian atmosphere is a residue from an enormous nuclear explosion. And we can see this when you split atoms. Normally you get two peaks of activity. You get like strontium-90 and iodine 137. Those are both things that you have to watch out for in fallout because they collect in the human body. But in a hydrogen bomb with fast neutrons, the double peak thing gets all smeared out. Here, on the other hand, is the output of an ordinary nuclear reactor. You can see it produces almost no 129 at all. So the 129 in the Earth's atmosphere is not due to any kind of nuclear reactor operating in a normal way. It is due to weapons. This is a weird meteorite. It's not from Mars. Turns out it has this same pattern of enormous amount of 129. This tells you about the planetary community. The planetary community is very much beholden to the US government on what it spends time investigating. All it takes is a raised eyebrow from your government sponsor, and your average college professor will completely lose interest in any line of investigation that the US government does not want to encourage. I only found this a week ago. It's been in the literature for years. It matches Mars, but no one has pointed this out except for me now at the next scientific meeting. And the reason is this is considered to be the result of a supernova explosion. In other words, a hydrogen bomb in space. So, something that looks like this. So we have weapon signature on Mars, and the only thing that resembles the xenon pattern is hydrogen bomb residues on Earth. If you look at the krypton, they analyzed the Mars rocks. We have Mars rocks now. Mars is sending us free samples. And we find that the krypton indicates that large areas of Mars were irradiated with a heavy dose of neutrons at high energy. Not only that, Mars' atmosphere is so thin that when we orbit probes around Mars, we can actually see gamma rays through the surface. And we find that Mars' surface is covered with a thin layer of uranium and thorium. We know it's a thin layer because the Mars meteorites we get hardly have any uranium and thorium at all in them, but the surface is covered with almost Earth normal amounts. And the radioactive the gamma rays from Mars come from two areas principally. This area in a place called Mare-Acidalium, and this area over here in a place called Utopia. This is potassium. Apparently this was something exploded here, sent streamers of material all the way around the planet, and shock waves that collided on the far side of the planet. On the opposite side, like you stuck a pencil through an orange and it came through the core and it came out the other side. This is what's called the antipode, indicating a global debris pattern. And you find the same thing in thorium. Here's Utopia, Mare-Acidalium, and the antipode. So we also find, if you look there does appear to be a burn spot. But whatever happened left no craters. There is no crater there. There should be a big hole blasted in the surface, but there's nothing. This means whatever happened was an airburst. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were airbursts. They did not explode the bombs in midair for humanitarian reasons at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. They knew if they did that, it would maximize shock wave damage to the civilian buildings. So, not only that, it was recently revealed that the areas where the radioactive activity occurs, here's Utopia, here's Mare-Acidalium, is covered with a peculiar glass called trinitite. It's found at the nuclear test site, and it's formed by a nuclear fireball above a desert. So, I did a terrible thing. I went to a conference and presented this. I went to Houston last year and presented all of this evidence. And I was looking for some brave soul to come up to me and say, Brandburg, you've got this wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Or something like of that nature. Instead, there was stunned silence when I showed everybody this. Finally, one of them asked me, did they do it to themselves or did somebody else do it? And that is the big question now. These explosions on Mars were not natural. There is no known natural phenomenon that could have caused these effects, turning thousands of square miles of Martian surface into molten glass, spreading radioactivity all the way around the planet, filling the atmosphere with isotopic residues of a fast neutron reaction like a bomb, and irradiating the surface with neutrons. This apparently happened about 250 million years ago, long time before the human race was around. There weren't even dinosaurs around when this happened. So, when we first found this, we reported it to the Pentagon. I was working closely with the Pentagon at the time. I showed it also to nuclear weapons experts that I worked with, and they agreed with me that my interpretation was correct. They can't be quoted publicly, unfortunately. And the US government, 6 months later, sent back word to me and said, publish. Yes, very strange. I will discuss the meaning of that in a few minutes. Now, what is the significance of two explosion sites, one in Mare Acidalium and one here in Utopia? They're both in the north, both over what used to be the dried ocean bed. But if you look on Mars, the prevailing winds, which send the strongest shock waves, and also the fallout, would have all gone here from this large one to a place called Cydonia Mensa. And the next one would have, the smaller one would have gone here to a place called Galaxius Chaos. I did not pick that name, by the way. That was a NASA-assigned name. And it sounds like an anime character. In fact, there is an anime character named Galaxius Chaos. And I'll show you, in fact, why they apparently named this place Galaxius Chaos. By the way, here are the rovers. Here's the Opportunity rover, and here's the Curiosity rover. You notice they landed them as far away as possible. We don't want to take any pictures that might cause problems. If we're just driving around Mars, we want to do it in a safe place. Now, the explosions appear to be correlated to deliver the maximum dose of fallout from the bomb explosions to these two sites. What is at these sites? Someone complained to me, John, why do you have to bring Cydonia into this? And I said, because I can read a map. It's a long forgotten art nowadays, and with everybody with GPS and iPhones, I said, but I actually read maps. Here's what's at Cydonia Mensa. There's the face on Mars. There's the D&M pyramid discovered by DePietro and Molinar. Here it is in a second shot. This was taken July 25th. This was taken 30 days later. The government was apparently doing a follow-up investigation. These two pictures tell you everything you need to know about what is Cydonia Mensa. If you see on a planet that used to be Earth-like a carved human face and a pyramid within 5 kilometers of each other, and this thing looks like some kind of other kind of ruin in between, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what this all means. You can connect the dots. Most people who have followed the Cydonia controversy know that NASA supposedly took this picture to lay the whole problem to bed, put the whole problem to bed. They released it unenhanced. In fact, they left, right, reversed it, and released it unenhanced, and they didn't tell anybody that they were taking the picture almost from the side. This is a three-dimensional reconstruction by Mark Carlotto of what the face would look like from the Viking pictures. Here's the picture they took. Here's the view from above that everyone was expecting. Notice the round crater beside there. This picture was taken recently, by the way, only about 5 years ago. This is what they released, was a blatant cover-up. I mean, sometimes, and I can tell you as a scientist, I've seen other scientists do this, if you're cornered, you just brazen it out. You hold up a picture of a buffalo and insist that it's a dog. And if anybody, then you glare at the audience. If you're Professor Blowhard Rhinoceros, then you can actually intimidate your other scientists into not questioning your assignment of the title of dog to what is obviously a buffalo, Plains buffalo. But in this case, what I've decided is the This picture, this visage appeared actually in 2 different Hollywood movies shortly thereafter, showing how frightening it was to actually the public. Hollywood picked it up to scare people. One was The Mummy. You'll see this picture in there. And also, it was in The Fellowship of the Ring, the squid-like creature that appears out of the lake when they're trying to go into Moria. Actually, if you look at one moment, it's actually this picture. And it's got nostrils in the nose, 2 eyes, nose, mouth. It's got ornaments on the helmet. This is a rotated 3D image. By the way, these were done by Mark Carlotto, and a brilliant, he's a PhD in image processing. And we delivered them straight to Dan Golden, the head of NASA. So he knew all about this. By the way, Dan Golden hated JPL because they wouldn't follow orders. He would issue memos and stuff telling him to do this and that, and they would just ignore him. They were out on the West Coast and figured they knew better because they're scientists, and he's nothing but all he is the NASA director. And so what we found out was that NASA is a bunch of ivory towers constantly fighting each other. The left hand and the right hand not only don't know what each other is doing, but they fight. So now, what do we got here? Well, this looks like a carved face, similar to what was carved by the Olmecs. There's a fascinating parallel through this of the connection with old Mexico. So, Mexicanos must go to Mars because they will understand this place better than most Americanos. Most gringos will not understand Mars, but the Mexicanos, they will. Well, because it looks like this is the Olmec heads. By the way, you'll notice one thing is called a frame corner, also head ornaments. Those are all present. The stuff on Mars is pretty beat up. I mean, this is probably 100 million years old. Even on Mars, there is erosion, not very fast, but anyway. We have more new images. These images are taken. Anybody can see the face on Mars. Just looks at the new images. This is the pyramid on Mars. I'm going to show you something very interesting. It looks like on this thing, there's what looks like a doorway. Actually, it's not a doorway. It's a place where it looks like a bunch of brickwork. Imagine you had carved a mountain so it looked like a pyramid and then faced it with brick to prevent erosion. And then some of the brickwork had turned loose one day on some rainy day and it collapsed and fallen off. So you have a debris flow pattern and it tears away a square. So this is Galaxis Chaos. Here is a new face, and here is another face. This is the one taken in Viking. This is the one taken recently. So this is another face. So we got this thing nailed, folks. And the people at JPL know it. They know the time is running out for this cover-up. Now, all the stuff if found on Earth would be viewed as signs of a dead civilization. And apparently we knew. This is Kirby Comics, 1958, Face on Mars. Space age had just begun. So the human race knew already that Mars was the site of a great tragedy. These pictures were released 2 weeks ago. They brought the spacecraft around and took pictures of the doorway, confirming, yes, it looks like brickwork. So everybody knows now. Also, Murphy's Law finally caught up with Jet Propulsion Lab, driving its little rover around, minding its own business. The joke is that they recruit their drivers for the rovers. They have to have driven in LA for 5 years. Anyone who's lived in LA knows if you see something strange beside the freeway, you do not look at it and you keep driving. Don't make eye contact. There's a car on fire with a person in a pink elephant suit waving for help, you just keep driving. And so that's the first question here is how long have you driven in LA and for how long? And then they recruit them to be rover drivers on Mars. And Murphy's Law says that no matter how well you try to avoid taking the picture that you're not supposed to take, eventually you take a picture of this. Now this thing looks like it's been beat up. It looks like this part got broken off, but there's an eyeball. There's a mouthful of teeth with lips and everything. And this looks like, again, something carved by the Aztecs. We call it, you can do Google on it, just because Google Mars Aztec head. We found a second shot. And here's the false color on it. It confirms all the teeth. So finally, they took a picture of the wrong thing, just minding their own business. And they didn't realize, obviously, what they took a picture of. We asked them for more pictures from this sequence, and we went through the files, and one of them is just everything shows rocks, very strange, interesting looking rocks, nothing like this, except for these two pictures. And then there's one frame that says, access denied. So we, at the Society for Planetary SETI, the group I belong to, we have now formally said, we would like to have access to the access denied picture, please, taken on the same day. And so we're waiting an answer from them. But these people are not even very imaginative. Not only that, they're frightened. If they erase the data, they are liable. That's against federal law to erase data. I can imagine meetings at Jet Propulsion Lab. I've worked in aerospace for a long time, and some manager is screaming at everybody, this is unacceptable. We're looking for somebody who's a real man who will just make these pictures disappear from the records. And we won't ask any questions, and neither will anybody else. We'll just say we don't know anything about it. But so far, the people who will volunteer for such a mission there aren't any more people. There used to be people who do that stuff like that. They don't do it anymore. Now I'm going to show you something which I regarded with great sadness when I first saw it. This is from the same picture showing the debris slide on the pyramid. This is the base of the pyramid, this area right here. The doorway was up here. This is down in the base, and this is apparently the ruins of a city on Mars that looks like it must have held 1 million people. It goes on for miles. This is a shot for overhead from Pompeii. What these things have is shared walls. This is an old fortification scheme for ancient cities where the buildings would be built so that they shared a big wall. It would be a defensive wall, and then they would divide off the walls the other way to form dwellings. So you can see here's these walls, and they run onto a hill. Some of them stop, but some of them wrap around the hill. And here they wrap around. So these are two shots. I will have the frame numbers so everyone else can verify this. This was released just 2 weeks ago. This is probably about 2 miles from here down to here. So this was a massive city. There is no geologic explanation for this. So anyway, it looks like we were talking about a city that had millions of people in it. Oh, I'm sorry, I will get that for you. I thought I'd put it on this, but it will be up on my website, which I'll show, and you'll be able to verify it. Yes. Anyway, in summary, xenon, krypton, uranium anomalies, the glass can be explained by a large thermonuclear weapon airburst on Mars in the past, and nothing else. There is no natural phenomenon that can explain these things we find. And I went to a scientific meeting where it was a bunch of I just concentrated on the evidence for the nuclear explosions, and no one contradicted me. 2 people have criticized my work. I've challenged both of them to debates. And both of them have decided they don't want to debate me. I didn't realize I was that intimidating a personality, but even on the radio, they won't debate me. And okay, it appears that Mars, the civilization appears quite primitive based on an Earth reference. That sounds like famous last words. We don't know what its technological level was, but it looks as though, based on an Earth reference, it was early Egypt. We're talking Mayan, Olmec, Aztec, not a advanced society. And therefore, the simplest hypothesis we can come up with is somebody apparently, Mars was like Earth. It became the home of a intelligence and finally a civilization, and then someone else came along and apparently destroyed them with massive nuclear weapons. And as I said, we informed the Pentagon, and they said publish. Now, I realize that is a lot to handle. I'm going to discuss how we handle this. Okay, the answer to Fermi's paradox may lay on Mars. The reason the universe is as silent as a cemetery, it may be a cemetery. Anyway, we've recommended that NASA do a 90-day study, including nuclear weapons experts. We must send astronauts to Mars to conduct an in-depth investigation of what happened there. Did the Martians know who did this to them, for instance? Perhaps they didn't get along with somebody from outer space. Maybe the people from outer space were mutilating their cattle or abducting them. Who knows? We must become spacefaring to ensure that what happened on Mars does not happen here. And here is my website, lifeonmars.pub. And also I have the book, Death on Mars, which is on sale here. That has all of this data, including all the frame numbers, except for the most recent ones. Now, this is a lot to wrap your head around, I know. Some of you may not have ever seen this stuff before. My own response was I thought I was facing a clinical depression for a while, and I started having nuclear war nightmares when I discovered that this was the only way to interpret this data. At first, I thought maybe it was a natural nuclear reactor on Mars that had blown up. Then I found out, no, it could not have been natural. The neutron spectrum had to be fast to make all the xenon, 129. So the mental survival kit for the new cosmos, nothing has changed. The stars are still all in the same place, they're the same color, but you must look at them differently than you did. What is the essence of the new cosmos? And my clip didn't play, so I have to just do my best. Please forgive me, for my singing voice is not good. It goes dun 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 dun. Those of you who remember, thank you. That is the background music for the bar scene in Star Wars. Friends, as Luke Skywalker asked Ben Kenobi, he says, "Do we got to go in there?" And he says, "Yeah." He said, "Just watch your step. The place can get a bit rough." As I said, we even recognize some of our old friends there. Makeup department, especially with the band, apparently borrowed from UFO literature. And the cosmos is not, those of you who are hoping the cosmos is full of things more wonderful and noble and finer than the earth, I'm sorry. That's not the way it is. The cosmos is a dive bar in Mos Eisley Spaceport. Or as the characters in my UFO novel to say, we have discovered the rest of the cosmos is just as screwed up as this planet is, maybe even more. I'm sorry. No, God didn't tell you everything, except in the original Greek, where it's clear as crystal. Go out into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. By the way, St. Francis of Assisi interpreted this really cute. He would preach to the animals. He had a little hut in the woods, and he would hold sermons every Sunday, and the little birds and squirrels and stuff would come and listen to him. They said it was amazing. People didn't know whether they actually learned anything from his sermons, but he was attempting to do that. The word that is translated as world is the word cosmos in the Greek, the original language of the New Testament. For God so loved the world, cosmos, that he gave his only Son. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the cosmos. Look it up. Get a Strong's Concordance. You can just go online, look up those verses, and look up for a Greek translation from the original Greek, and you'll see the word cosmos. That word, cosmos, means exactly then what it means now, the whole universe. Remember, we're talking the Greeks. By 200 BC, the Greeks, led by Aristarchus of Samos, had achieved a modern understanding of the cosmos. They knew the solar system, they knew the Earth was a planet, they knew it was round because it cast a round shadow on the moon during eclipses, that it was moving around the sun. They knew the order of the planets. They knew that the other stars were other suns with planets around them. Just to show you the emotional impact of this, when this was described to Alexander the Great, he wept. He said, "You've told me there are many worlds. I can't even conquer one." So St. Paul was trained in Greek philosophy. Peter was just a fisherman. But St. Peter was trained, he was a trained Greek philosopher. His traveling companion was named Aristarchus. This is 200 years after Aristarchus of Samos. This is Aristarchus of Thessaly, but he's obviously named after this guy. So God did tell you. He just wasn't really blatant about it. So you guys need a new mindset for a new cosmos. And the best way to look to this is in science fiction. Captain Kirk. He knows he's not alone in the universe. This doesn't bother him. He's supposed to go out and seek peaceful contact and discover them. We can learn a lot from the people in the stars. We really can. Peaceful contact and interchange. That's his mission. But he also knows that the universe can be very dangerous, and he believes that goodwill, God, guts, and guns will answer this situation. Yes. Here's another guy. He knows he's not alone in the universe also and deals with it. He knows the universe can be dangerous. That's why he carries a blaster, too. He knows that God, guts, and guns will answer the situation. The discovery and peaceful interchange part, well, whatever. If he can earn some, he's interested in making a living in the new cosmos. So I would argue that the new mindset is to realize the cosmos is a tough place, and we live on a tough planet. Tell me something I don't know, friend. And if you've watched any of the Clint Eastwood movies, you know when he stands that way, it's He's thinking, go ahead, make my day. No, but I'm just saying, you have to realize that the human race and this planet are not an aberration on the cosmos. We are part of its fabric. If you this underlying principle of SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is the principle of mediocrity. That says that the human race is typical, it's average, it's mediocre. We used to think we were the most evil creatures in the cosmos. It turns out that was just conceit. Somebody has already done deeds of evil on Mars that we couldn't even comprehend. Now, here's the really frightening aspect of this. Why is the government telling us this? Why is it letting, why didn't somebody call me up and say, Dr. Brandburg, we really wish you wouldn't go to the secret program, space program conference? Please don't talk about this. I used to have very high security clearances, nothing covering this directly, by the way. That would have been sufficient. Instead, the government said, go ahead and publish. When somebody who constantly, lies continually to you, starts speaking the truth to you, be afraid. Be very afraid. We must be in worse trouble than we thought. Now, why is the government telling this now? As near as I can guess. Well, like all governments, it wants to preserve and expand its power. If the human race is wiped out, the power elites of this country know the stock market will suffer. Let's not even talk about the bond market. So they want to preserve the human race because what good is it being a chief if you don't have any Indians? In other words, we're all in this boat together. And it's a lot smaller boat than we thought, in a much bigger ocean. So yes, the human race needs to survive, and the human race wants to survive, and the government is an extension of the human race. Uncle Sammy wants to go to Mars. That should be fairly obvious to you now. If you take the movies Gravity, Interstellar, and the recent one, The Martian, we are being sold on the idea of space and Mars. The public is being sold. All of those all those high-budget movies were bankrolled out of Hollywood and meant to try and revive the heroics of the space age of the 60s. My comment when I heard them that they were building the space launch system by rearranging parts of the old shuttle, I told a friend, this is rather frightening because the government is actually doing something that makes sense. Why not reinvent a whole new rocket for 10 times the cost? Why use pieces that are already tested and developed? Well, the government's in a hurry now. We want to advance science and technology. The government also knows, probably better than anyone, that all secrets have a shelf life. Everybody knows about this. Look at this conference. We also know the government has other things that it probably should tell us, but hasn't decided to tell us. It's only laying down a few cards of the deck of the hand that it is holding. You can guess the rest. Also, most people don't realize that the scientific revolution guaranteed a victory for the West militarily. The Turkish Empire was trying to invade Europe just at the time the scientific revolution happened. If you want to know what the Turkish Empire was like in those days, just turn on the news and follow what's going on in the Middle East. They were at the gates of Vienna, but there they met the Europeans, and the Europeans had worked out, because of the scientific revolution, how to aim cannons better than the Turks. They'd also invented these things called telescopes, where it enables you to see farther than the Turks could. And the Turks despised Western science and rejected it because it was Western. and then they were defeated. So we're doing this to advance Western values. One of the things the jihadi in the Middle East brag about is they say, well, you guys have all this technology. We have time. We have time and ignorance on our side. And I mean, I talked to my son, who's like 21. He says, you mean we're going to be at war with these people for the next 100 years? And I said, yeah. And he says, that's just, I can't accept that. And I said, well, you'll have to. I said, you're talking to your old pappy here. He went through the 40 years of the Cold War. And the best way, all of war is psychological. All of war is psychological, ultimately. And one way to win a war is simply change the subject. Also, our government apparently wants to impress some other people who may be watching. Some of them you know, a fellow named Vladimir, some other people. Then there's some other people the government doesn't want to talk about knowing they're watching too. They're watching to see what the human race will do now that it knows that whole planets can be destroyed, if for no other reason, just to set an example for the universe. My own belief is that what we found on Mars is now a cosmic Darwinian intelligence test for the human race. So far, we are failing it, but not much longer. No. This is getting out. The book, this is being published. It's getting out. People say nasty things about Brandburg. Brandburg doesn't know what he's talking about. And then they say, well, Brandburg wants to challenge you to a debate on the space show. Oh, I'm busy that night. Brandburg, everyone knows, is unreasonable as well as not knowing anything. So anyway, now, how do I feel about secrecy in government? I wrote this novel based on my years in Washington, D.C., working closely with the Pentagon on space. Secrecy in government is a evil which is sometimes necessary, but I think it's a good thing that this cover-up on Mars is ending. And hopefully at some point we can sit down and have a frank conversation, not about what happened on Mars 250 million years ago, but what is happening right now. But in the meantime, this is what the government is saying. I want you to get tough, go to Mars. And we can say, yes, we can do it. I'm working on unified gravity E&M to get us to Mars quicker. So is Paul DeVillette here. One of us is going to be right. All of us are going to be partially right. So anyway, in summary, it appears there was Mars was the site of a planetary nuclear massacre. The comparison of the technology which destroyed Mars and the technology of the civilization that was apparently there is pathetic. It looks like it was a Bronze Age civilization destroyed by a nuclear attack from space. The universe is silent and forbidding. The galactic welcome wagon has not exactly arrived to welcome us into the galactic and the United Nations. No, we just find the nearby planet has been massacred by somebody. We must go to Mars and become spacefaring. We don't have any choice. You must trust to goodwill, discovery, and God, guts, and guns in this new cosmos. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. 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 Thank you.
Mr. Brandburg, Dr. Brandburg.
Yes.
Man. So we'll take a 15-minute break. Be sure and come back on time if you can, and we will hear from Olav Phillips on alternative